So, when you think about localizing software for the Spanish-speaking world, it's easy to picture this one massive market. But, treating all 20 of those countries as if they're the same, that's probably one of the biggest and most expensive mistakes a business can make. Let's really dig into why that is. So yeah, how hard can it really be? I mean, Spanish is Spanish, isn't it? Well, that's the big idea we're going to take apart piece by piece in this explainer. The reality is just so much more complex, and honestly, it's a lot more fascinating.
Okay, let's start with a really simple puzzle. In Spain, if you're talking about a customer, you say cliente. Easy enough. But then you go to Mexico, and in a formal accounting setting, that same person is called a deudor. So why the different word? And this isn't just a quirky synonym. This is our very first clue that we're about to go down a pretty deep rabbit hole.
And that little word difference, it pulls us right into our first major section, words that mean business. We're talking about moving way beyond just simple translation and into a vocabulary that has real, actual financial and legal weight. Now, what's so wild is that the whole cliente versus deudor thing, it's not a one-off. It is absolutely a pattern. You can actually see two distinct groups here. In Group A countries, like Spain and Chile, you're going to use words like cliente and importe. But in Group B, which covers places like Mexico and Ecuador, the standard is deudor and monto. These aren't just little regional quirks. They are the required professional terms for accounting.
So here's the real kicker. Deudor literally translates to debtor. It's not just a casual, friendly word for a customer. No, it is a formal accounting term that defines a legal financial relationship on a company's balance sheet. So using the wrong word here isn't just a style mistake. It's an accounting error.
Okay, so the words are different. Big deal, right? Well, it gets way, way deeper. Let's peel back the next layer of this onion and see what happens when the actual rules of the game, the very structure of financial reports, start to change from place to place. And wow, this slide just perfectly lays out the divide. In Spain, they use their own standard called the PGC, and it organizes the balance sheet by maturity. That means all the long-term stuff comes first. But over in most of Latin America, they use the international IFRS standard, which sorts everything by liquidity, putting the short-term items right at the top. We're talking about two completely opposite ways of looking at a company's financial health. So what does that actually mean when your software spits out a report? Well, everything gets flipped on its head. The entire sort order changes. Cash, right, the most liquid asset you have, shows up at the very top of a balance sheet in Peru, but it's buried way down at the end in Spain. This is not a minor formatting thing. Your software needs a completely different logic to build these reports correctly. And if you're thinking, well, maybe it's a 50-50 split, think again. Just look at this. The IFRS standard, which is called NIIF in Spanish, is completely dominant across Latin America. We're talking 95% adoption. So Spain's PGC, while totally valid there, is really the exception, not the rule, when you look at the entire Spanish-speaking world. All right, we've talked about words, we've talked about accounting rules, but now we get to the deepest, most complicated layer of all, the real boss level, tax and compliance. This is where you run smack into the hard truth that no matter what language you speak, the law is always local. Let's play a quick game. Your software has a field for a tax ID. What do you call it? In Spain, it's a NIF. Okay, simple enough. But pop over to Mexico, and that exact same field has to be for an RFC. That one generic tax ID field is starting to look a little shaky, isn't it? And finally, in Argentina, it's a CUIT. So you've got NIF, RFC, and CUIT. One language, 3 countries, 3 totally different legally required IDs. You can see how this becomes a massive headache for development, right? And this table just drives that point home. The difficulty is all over the map. Localizing for Panama? Pretty straightforward. You just make a few tax tweaks. But Mexico? Oh, that's a whole other level. You have to use an official mandatory catalog of accounts directly from the government. And then there's Venezuela, which is just extreme, forcing you to deal with hyperinflation and exchange controls. It is definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation. I mean, listen to this quote. It sums up the challenge perfectly. For some of these more complex markets, you're not just translating or tweaking. You're literally building a brand new accounting system from the ground up, and every single rule is dictated by local law.
Okay, so this all sounds incredibly complicated, right? It can feel overwhelming. So what's the solution? How do you actually succeed? Well, the key is to completely shift your thinking. Move from simple translation to a much deeper strategy of true adaptation.
It really boils down to this 4-step game plan. First, start with a solid template based on IFRS, since we know that's the standard almost everywhere in Latin America. Step 2, you have to map out and add all the country-specific legal and tax accounts. 3, you align all the names, the nomenclature, to the correct local terms we saw earlier. And finally, number 4, the most critical step of all, and you cannot skip this, you have to consult a local expert, a local accountant. That is the only way to guarantee you are fully compliant.
So at the end of the day, this is the question you really have to ask yourself. Is your software just translated, or is it truly ready? Because to actually win in the 20 incredibly diverse markets of the Spanish-speaking world, you have to go so much deeper than just the words.